My son chuckled, loud enough to echo through the church just as I said her name. His wife leaned in, whispered something, and they both burst into laughter, heads turned. The pastor froze. A few guests shifted, whispering and looking away. Not a single voice rose to quiet them. I couldn't breathe. He hadn't laughed at me like that since he was 10. Why now? Then the deacon stepped forward, not with the offering plate, but holding a will, her signature clear. But my name wasn't on it. This wasn't just about money. This was my legacy, my home of 40 years, my entire life's reputation, erased in front of the community. They thought I was finished. But what they didn't know, I tightened my grip on the pocket watch in my vest. The real deed was inside. Who had forged the signature on that document? How deep did this betrayal go? And why here in front of everyone we knew? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. That night, the house felt like a museum someone had already decided to shut down. The flowers from the funeral still sat in buckets by the door, their petals drooping under the weight of silence. I sat alone in the living room, the only light coming from the brass lamp she'd loved. It cast a dull glow across the mantel, right where her photo now stood next to a candle. My fingers rubbed slow circles against the engraved surface of my pocket watch, its ticking louder than the hush that had taken over the home. Footsteps approached. Then her voice. "Do you mind if we move the piano out this weekend? It really eats up the space." I looked up. My daughter-in-law was already scribbling on a notepad, eyes scanning the room like an interior designer before a flip. "That piano was hers," I said. She smirked. "Exactly. It's not needed anymore." Behind her, my son hovered like a ghost, hands in his pockets. Eyes on the floor, I stood. "This house is still mine." Her pen stopped mid-scratch. "Actually, wasn't it always hers?" The silence tightened, then he spoke. "She told me once she only stayed for you." There it was, a knife, dulled by years but finally twisted. I stepped forward, pocket watch heavy in my palm. "You stood beside me today, at her funeral, and now you mock her memory?" "No one's mocking her," she said lightly, brushing imaginary dust from a windowsill. "We're just trying to make this space livable." It was livable. "For 38 years, she laughed once, sharp and hollow. 38 years of wallpaper no one wants." I turned to my son looking for something, remorse, discomfort, anything. He just shrugged. "Don't wait up. We've got plans tonight." He kissed her on the cheek and walked toward the door. She lingered. "You should consider sorting through your things. Some of the closets are overflowing." The click of her heels faded down the hallway. The front door shut behind them, and I stood there, alone again, with the ticking of the pocket watch marking the seconds I no longer recognized the life I'd built. I moved through the house like a man trapped in someone else's blueprint. The living room had new paint swatches taped to the wall. My recliner was gone. In its place, a glass coffee table with magazines I'd never seen. I reached the kitchen. Empty wine glasses in the sink. Her apron, my wife's apron, was gone from the hook. It had begun already. Not grief, erasure. The pocket watch trembled slightly in my palm as I opened it. The engraving inside, "To Jack, my constant." Love him, constant, not accessory, not habit, constant. That night I didn't sleep. The bed felt foreign without her warmth. I laid the watch on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling while voices from downstairs carried through the vents. Laughter. Music. And once, clearly, my name. When I rose the next morning, the front porch had a new package, a box of curtain rods, a Home Depot receipt clipped to the side. My name wasn't on the address label, just my son's. The door creaked open behind me. "I told the delivery guy to leave it around back," she said. Toothbrush still in hand, I didn't respond. She looked at me like I was a tenant who'd overstayed his lease. "You all right?" she asked flatly. I wanted to say something sharp, something cruel, but the words stayed buried behind decades of dignity. Instead, I picked up the box, walked back inside, and set it on the table. She watched me, bemused. "That's helpful of you." And just before she turned, she added, "You know, she wanted a more modern look anyway. You keeping the place dusty wasn't love. It was fear of change." Then she walked away, and for the first time, I considered the truth. Maybe they weren't just mocking me. Maybe they believed they were right, but whether they believed it or not, one thing was clear. The house no longer felt like mine. I retrieved the pocket watch from the dresser upstairs, winding it slowly as I looked out the bedroom window. The backyard was already stripped of her garden. The roses were gone. What plans could they possibly have the night of her funeral? The mailman wouldn't meet my eyes. I was sipping cold coffee on the porch when the mailman arrived. He walked with his head slightly down, shoulders hunched as if the weight of the envelopes in his satchel included my humiliation. He slid the stack into the box and offered a half-hearted nod before turning quickly back down the steps. Normally, he'd ask about my wife. Or offer a weather comment. That morning, nothing. I flipped through the mail. Utility bill, estate management flyer, a glossy catalog for senior relocation services, with a sticky note that read, "Request your free transition consult today." I stared at it long enough for the ink to blur. Then I heard her voice behind me. That unnervingly cheerful tone. Oh good, that came. My parents want to walk through the house today. Just a casual visit. I turned slowly. Her parents were already stepping out of their car, dressed like they were attending an open house. Clipboard in hand. Smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Walk through? I repeated. She brushed past me. You know, measure a few things. Talk layout. Nothing big. Layout for what? She paused on the doorstep, tilted her head. Jack, come on. You know you can't stay here alone. Forever. That's when he stepped out, my son holding a stack of folded moving boxes. He didn't say a word, just placed them by the door and looked away. The next hour moved like a dream I couldn't wake from. Her parents walked through every room, opened cabinets, took notes, whispered, laughed. Once her mother stood in my wife's sewing room and said, "This could be a perfect nursery." I followed them silently, pocket watch heavy in my hand, tucked deep in my sweater. In the living room, my son finally spoke. "You could be comfortable." "Dad, we already toured that place in Fairwood. They've got piano nights, a garden club." I stared at him. "You want me gone?" He raised his hands. "I'm trying to help," her voice cut in. "You need structure. And peace. And honestly, this house has too many stairs." I turned, my voice low. "You said she stayed here out of habit. But now her memory's inconvenient." Her smile faltered. "This isn't about memory. It's about moving forward." Then she reached into a drawer near the entryway, pulled out a roll of tape. "Just start thinking about what you want to take. We'll help pack." That's when I saw it. A set of cardboard boxes already labeled, each one with my name scribbled in black marker. Jack, closet. Jack, garage. Jack, photos. My name scrawled on boxes like I was already gone. I stepped outside. Air colder than expected. Across the street, my neighbor Mr. Crane stood beside his lawnmower, pretending to fix something. But his eyes flicked up, watching. Then Mrs. Hawley from 3 doors down passed by, her little dog tugging the leash. She looked over, gave a tight smile, then quickly looked away. Whispers. Already. The street knew. I leaned on the porch rail, pocket watch ticking in my hand, and tried to stop the ache rising in my chest. "They're telling people I'm leaving?" I asked quietly when my son joined me outside. He exhaled. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I just..." He paused, avoiding my eyes. "We need the space, Dad. You have an entire home of your own." His jaw tightened. Not like this. There it was, not a plea. A claim. They weren't asking me to leave. They were asking for the house. My house. His mother's home. Ours. I looked at the watch in my palm, opened it. The engraving glinted. To Jack, my constant. Love M. She had written that decades ago, and now they wanted to box me up like attic clutter. That night I sat in the sewing room, her room, and stared at the shelves. Her fabrics. The jar of buttons she'd collected from every shirt she'd ever mended. The photo of us at the fair in '89, still stuck into the mirror frame. Outside, the porch light flickered. A neighbor's voice floated through an open window. I thought he'd moved out already. Another answered, "No, they're packing him up." Sad, isn't it? Sad. I clutched the watch tight. Let them think what they wanted, let them whisper, because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. My name scrawled on boxes like I was already gone. The banker asked if I authorized the withdrawal. The sun hadn't fully risen when I parked outside First Mason Bank, the branch I'd been using for over 30 years. I'd barely slept. My head buzzed with fragments of whispers, boxes labeled with my name, and the sound of my son's voice asking if I needed structure. No one who loves you says that with a clipboard in their hand. Inside, the air smelled like paper and coffee. My steps echoed on the tile floor as I approached the counter. I tapped the pocket watch against my palm, counting each tick like it might anchor me to some version of reality where this wasn't happening. A young teller greeted me with too much cheer. "How can I help you today, Mr. Dawson?" "I need to speak with a manager about a recent withdrawal from my joint account." She typed something, hesitated, and looked uncomfortable. "Of course, Mr. Leary can help you this way." I followed her into a glass-walled office where Mr. Leary, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and kind eyes, stood to shake my hand. We sat. I explained, his expression dimmed. "Mr. Dawson, you're referring to the joint account you shared with your wife?" "Yes, that one. There's been movement on it, and I never touched it." He cleared his throat, pulled up the file, and scrolled. "There was a withdrawal 2 days ago. 48,200 loan clearance." I blinked. "Loan? Yes, sir. The house was used as collateral. Paperwork was processed under your wife's name." My chest tightened. "She's dead." "Yes, He looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "I see her death certificate was filed, but the withdrawal still cleared. Her signature is here, digitally." He turned the monitor toward me, and there it was. My wife's name, scrawled in a slanted hand. Underneath, digital timestamp dated 3 days after her funeral. "That's impossible," he hesitated. Then leaned forward. "Mr. Dawson, may I ask, did you authorize anyone to act on your behalf? Any power of attorney transfers?" "No," he clicked his pen nervously. "Because the loan documents include a secondary approval. From your son." The world slowed. I felt the watch in my pocket like a hot coal. "I never approved that," I said. "And she wouldn't either. Especially not using the house." Mr. Leary nodded slowly. "Would you like me to file a formal inquiry?" "Yes, immediately." Just then I heard laughter, familiar and close. I turned my head. In the hallway beyond the glass walls, my son walked past with his wife. She was holding a coffee. He wore that same smug, low-energy smile he always wore when he knew something you didn't. He saw me, raised his eyebrows, paused. Then he stepped into the office. "Hey, Dad," he said, tone casual. "Didn't know you'd be here." Mr. Leary's eyes flicked between us. "Mr. Dawson and I were just reviewing some account activity." My son glanced at the screen. "Oh, that?" "Yeah, we already settled that. It's done." I stood slowly. "You signed off on a loan against this house?" He shrugged. "It's what Mom would have wanted. You just didn't get around to handling it, so we stepped in." His wife appeared in the doorway. "It's just paperwork, Jack. Don't make it weird." I looked at Mr. Leary. "Is this legal?" He adjusted his tie. "If both parties signed and the digital credentials passed authentication, it's technically valid, but if you dispute it, we can start a review." I pulled out the pocket watch, set it gently on the desk. Its ticking was louder in that moment than the blood rushing in my ears. "That signature," I said, "was made after she was buried." Mr. Leary paled slightly. "I'll start the review today." My son smirked. "Dad, come on. Why are you making this harder than it has to be? We're helping you." I faced him squarely. "Helping me? By stealing from your mother's grave?" His expression tightened, but only slightly. "It's not stealing. It's managing. You're grieving. We're protecting the legacy." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You forged her name." He didn't deny it, didn't blink, just smiled and said, "You'll always have memories. Let us handle the money." That line would ring in my ears for days. That and the slow, relentless tick of the pocket watch reminding me that every second I stayed quiet. They moved further in. They hadn't just boxed up my clothes, they were stripping the walls. Down, plaster and memory and all. I left the bank with a printed fraud report and trembling hands. In the parking lot, I saw them laughing again, leaning against their car, sipping lattes like it was just another errand. How did they forge a signature of someone already buried? The ticking grew louder after they left. I returned to a house that no longer whispered her name. It only echoed theirs. Her scent was fading from the hallway, replaced by the chemical sharpness of paint samples and furniture polish. Even the soft hum of her favorite kitchen radio had been replaced by silence. But the ticking, it wouldn't stop. Not the pocket watch this time. The old grandfather clock in the hallway. The one she made me promise never to move. It was louder than I remembered. Unsettlingly so, I stood in front of it listening. Tick, tick, tick. They'd been gone for hours, out with her parents again, handling arrangements, whatever that meant. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even told. But I didn't care. My hands were trembling for another reason. The face of the grandfather clock stared back like a wound that never healed. She had wound it every Sunday without fail. Not me, never me. I opened the glass casing. The brass pendulum swung gently, but the sound was coming from behind. I removed the side panel carefully, and there it was. A white envelope. Pressed flat against the wood, aged slightly. Sealed and hand-addressed. Jack, only if something feels wrong. I froze, then opened it with the kind of fear usually reserved for hospital calls. Inside, a folded letter. Written in her slanted, precise handwriting, dated 2 weeks before she died. Jack, if you're reading this, then I didn't get to say it out loud. But I felt something. Something off. I didn't want to worry you, but our son, he's been asking questions about the house. About the accounts. He said he was helping. But I could tell he wasn't. I overheard them. His wife wants to secure the assets before I'm gone. They think I don't understand their code words. But I do. I'm scared. Not of dying, but of being erased before I'm even cold. Of you losing the home we built because I didn't act fast enough. If you're reading this, Jack, please protect what's left. Of me, of us. And no, if I changed any papers, I didn't do it by choice. Love. I read it twice, then again, the words blurred. But one line stayed carved in my mind. They think I don't understand their code words. But I do. I leaned against the hallway wall. Legs weak, she knew, not just about their greed, but their timing, their strategy, their betrayal, and she didn't tell me, not face to face, but she left a breadcrumb. In the one place I would never think to look, until the ticking grew too loud to ignore. I walked slowly to the study, where her quilt still covered the reading chair, sat down, held the pocket watch in one hand, the letter in the other. Together they felt like her voice, one ticking with time, the other frozen in it. I thought back to the banker's office. The forged signature, the loan, the fake approval, and now this, the note behind the clock. She had tried to warn me, but I hadn't listened. Not until it was almost too late. I walked into the kitchen and laid the letter flat on the counter. Next to it, the bank's fraud document, and between them, the pocket watch still ticking. Everything connected now. She feared losing the house we built. She knew they were circling, and she didn't trust them, not even her own son. I picked up the letter again and read the last line a fourth time. If I changed any papers, I didn't do it by choice. That was enough. Enough to burn the fog away. I opened her filing cabinet in the hallway closet, where she kept warranties, instructions, and boring stuff, as she called it. Behind a stack of recipe clippings, I found her original living will. No power of attorney changes, no revised ownership deeds, no mention of her signing anything with her son. The documents at the bank were lies, or, worse, fabricated posthumously. I copied everything, scanned the letter, photographed the envelope, and then I made 2 phone calls. First, to the same lawyer who handled our mortgage in '92, then to the local DA's office quietly, just to ask what kind of paperwork would constitute posthumous fraud. No charges. Yet but seeds were being planted. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't drink, I just sat on the porch, watching the dust crawl in. Her letter tucked inside my jacket, the pocket watch ticking like it had just been wound for the first time. Inside they returned. Laughter, more wine, music from the Bluetooth speaker. She passed me without a word. My son paused just long enough to ask, "Everything okay?" I nodded slowly. Better than it's been in days. His eyes narrowed. But he didn't press. He would, soon, because things were going to change. What had they done to silence her fears? The lawyer wouldn't look me in the eye. 2 days later, my son told me we had a quick paperwork thing at the lawyer's office. Just a formality to help streamline the estate. He used that phrase like it was supposed to comfort me. Like I didn't already know what was coming, but I went. Because sometimes you have to walk straight into their trap, just to spring it yourself. The office was on Main Street, tucked between a florist and a frozen yogurt shop. I hadn't been inside in years, not since we finalized our last refinance. Back when decisions were made together. Back when my wife and I held hands while we signed. Now I sat alone, pocket watch warm in my vest, ticking against my heart. The receptionist didn't smile when she saw me. She nodded stiffly. Mr. Dawson, they're already inside. I stepped into the conference room. My son sat at the head of the table like he owned it. His wife was flipping through a color-coded folder. And next to them, my lawyer, or so I thought. Jack, he said with a flat smile. Thanks for coming. We're just reviewing a deed reassignment. It's mostly housekeeping. I didn't sit yet. I scanned the table. Legal pads, 2 pens, 3 copies of a document I wasn't allowed to see until now. What's this? I asked. His wife slid a packet toward me. A survivorship transfer. Basically, it updates the deed so everything flows smoothly now that Marlene's passed. My son chimed in. You'll still live here, Dad. This just keeps the county happy. The county right. I picked up the packet, but didn't read it yet. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? We didn't want to burden you, she said sweetly. We're trying to protect you from the mess. I sat slowly, unfolded the first page. My name was there, along with legal language. I recognized just enough to feel nauseous. This wasn't housekeeping. This was a reassignment of the deed, with full control transferring to my son and his wife. I looked up. You're transferring ownership to yourselves. He raised his eyebrows, defensive already. Temporarily. You'll still have access, I repeated. I turned to the lawyer. Did Marlene approve this? He cleared his throat. The documents reflect current survivorship law. I asked if she approved this. A pause, then a sigh. There was a supplemental form submitted after her passing, digitally signed. I stood, pulling out the folded copy of her real will, the one I'd scanned from her file cabinet. I set it on the table next to the form. No mention of reassignment. No digital addendums. Just her, me, and this house. His wife leaned forward. Jack, we're not here to debate the past. I ignored her. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out the original letter, her letter, and placed it between the 2 documents. This is what she left me. Not just the house. Her truth. The room went still. Then my son laughed. Nervous. High-pitched. You're playing detective now? You're forging your mother's name. The lawyer shifted in his seat. She left the house to me, I said. Not to your credit cards. Not to your renovations. To me? I snapped the packet closed and slid it back across the table. I'm not signing. Her smile cracked. Then we'll have to pursue this through legal means. Do it, I said calmly, standing. Just make sure to bring your version of the truth. I've got mine. They didn't follow me out, but someone else did. The moment I opened the door, I saw him, Reed Simmons, a local realtor, standing on the sidewalk, holding flyers with a photo of my home. My home? What are you doing here? I asked. He looked startled, then awkward. Just meeting a client. Quick walkthrough. A walkthrough of what? My son stepped out behind me. Dad, let's just talk. I turned to the realtor. Did they tell you I'd already signed? He hesitated. They said it was finalized. I pointed to the lawyer's door. Go in there. Ask who owns the house. People were watching now. A woman with a stroller. A man coming out of the yogurt shop, eyes shifting toward us. Whispering already, and then I saw her, Mrs. Hawley, my neighbor, walking across the street, pausing mid-step. I took the pocket watch from my vest, held it up. This, I said to no one in particular, was given to me by the woman whose name they've been forging. The woman who trusted me, not them. I placed it gently back in my pocket. Reed folded his flyers, excused himself, and walked away without a word. My son's wife muttered, This is embarrassing. I turned to her. It's criminal. The lawyer reappeared behind them. Mr. Dawson, we can reschedule. No, we're done. And I walked down the sidewalk like I was the only man who remembered what truth actually sounded like. Behind me, their silence was louder than the ticking in my chest. What if my signature was already on their papers? I still remembered one number they didn't. Drove straight from the lawyer's office to the old downtown branch of County First. Not the polished building my son preferred, the one with the sleek espresso bar and glass conference rooms. No, I went to the building where I opened my first checking account, where the teller still called me Mr. Dawson and asked about the high school football team I used to coach. The place smelled like dust and real wood. And more importantly, my old pension account lived here. The one even my wife had almost forgotten existed, but I hadn't. I walked to the counter, clutching my pocket watch in one hand, papers in the other. The watch hadn't stopped ticking since I found her letter. That meant something. "Can I help you, sir?" the clerk asked, young but polite. "Yes," I said. "I need to freeze a legacy account, and I need to do it now." She led me to a private room where the branch manager, a woman in her 50s named Carla, reviewed my ID and listened carefully. "This is a survivor account?" she asked. "It's mine. Opened long before the joint one. No cosigner, no power of attorney filed. I want it locked today." She tapped keys with certainty. "Done," she said after a beat. "Nothing leaves this account without your signature. Not even a whisper." I exhaled. That was one piece of the puzzle they couldn't touch anymore. Carla tilted her head. "If you don't mind me asking, Mr. Dawson, is everything all right?" I pulled the folded copy of my wife's letter from my jacket and laid it on the table. Just the first paragraph. Her eyes scanned it. Her mouth tightened. "I'm not accusing yet," I said softly, "but I'm not waiting to be the last one in the room either." She nodded, pushing the paper back gently. "You're doing the right thing." I left that bank with something I hadn't had in weeks, a small, quiet breath of control. When I got home, the house was dark, but not quiet. Laughter spilled from the back porch, my son and his wife drinking wine, string lights blinking like some cheap cafe they'd brought home from a vacation brochure. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, watching them through the glass. She leaned over and whispered something. He laughed. My pocket watch ticked. I stepped into the light. They froze when they saw me. "Everything okay?" he asked, his smile already fading. "I made some changes today," I said. Her voice sharpened. "What kind of changes?" "The kind that keep my name on my accounts. And yours off them." "A beat. You're being paranoid," he said. "No one's stealing from you." "You're not smart enough to do it without leaving footprints," I said calmly. "And you've left more than a few." Her wine glass shook slightly. "Where were you today?" I asked. He hesitated. "Errands. Before or after you visited the county clerk's office?" Her expression tightened. That was all the confirmation I needed. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the bank's receipt confirming the freeze, and set it on the table between us. "Try and touch $1, I said. "You'll find frostbite waiting." "You're making this ugly," he snapped. "No," I said, turning back toward the house. "You did that when you laughed at her funeral." The silence behind me was rich. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the pocket watch tick against my chest. I'd made the first move. It wasn't grand. It wasn't public. But it was permanent. And when you deal with thieves dressed as family, permanence is power. I opened her letter again, read that last line a fifth time. "Please protect what's left. Of me. Of us." That's exactly what I planned to do. The next morning, the shouting started early. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee when he stormed in. "You froze the account?" he barked. "You mean my account? You can't do that." I sipped slowly. "Apparently I can." She followed behind him, still in a silk robe. "You're creating a hostile environment, Jack." I smiled. "You've mistaken hospitality for compliance." "You're forcing us to escalate," she said, teeth clenched. "Then escalate," I said. "But remember, every move leaves a record." He paced. "You're acting like we're strangers." "No," I said. "I'm acting like I finally see you clearly." The pocket watch ticked on the counter next to my mug. Tick, tick, tick. Their faces twisted in frustration, not just because I'd struck first, but because I'd done it so quietly they hadn't even noticed until it was too late. And now, they'd have to scramble. Lies, after all, don't keep balance like ledgers do. Their plan never needed me, it needed my signature. The door locks were changed while I napped. I wasn't asleep for long. Maybe 30 minutes at most, just enough to let the afternoon heat settle in through the window. But when I woke, the front door didn't open. I turned the knob, nothing locked from the outside. I checked the back door. Same story. Then I saw it. The key I always kept in the kitchen drawer, gone. The small brass one with the red thread. Gone. My pocket watch ticked inside my robe pocket as I stood in the hallway, listening for movement. The house was silent. Too silent. Then I heard the car pull in. My son, his wife, and someone else. Familiar boots on the pavement. A low male voice. I looked through the front window. A police officer. My stomach dropped. I opened the blinds as they reached the door, and this time it opened from the outside, my son holding a new key. "Oh," he said. "You're up." The officer stepped in behind him, nodding politely. "Mr. Dawson?" I stayed still. "Yes?" "Your son mentioned some confusion. He said you might have gotten lost this morning. Something about forgetting where you were going." My eyes locked on my son. He gave a little shrug. "You missed your breakfast appointment." "We got worried. I had no appointment." "That's not what the facility said," his wife added quickly. "They called us. Said he never showed." "I never scheduled anything," I said flatly. The officer looked between us. "Sir, can I see some ID?" I pulled it from my wallet. My driver's license. Still valid. Still clean. Then I reached into my robe pocket and held up the pocket watch. "This house," I said, "was a wedding gift." "That engraving inside?" Her handwriting, I held it open for him. "To Jack, my constant. Love, M." The officer studied it for a moment, then nodded. "She passed recently?" he asked gently. 2 weeks ago." My son interjected. "Dad's had a rough time. We just want to make sure he's safe." I turned to him. "Safe from what exactly?" He didn't answer. The officer adjusted his stance. "Mr. Dawson, is anyone forcing you to stay here? Or preventing you from leaving?" "No," I said clearly. "But someone did change the locks while I was sleeping." The officer turned to my son. He raised his hands. "We thought it was time to upgrade the system." The cop glanced at his notes, then back to me. "Sir, if you feel unsafe or manipulated in any way, we can bring in a social worker." I shook my head. "Not yet," he nodded. "All right, but I'll leave you my card. And if anything else happens, anything, you call." He handed me the card, and I slipped it into the front of my pocket watch case before snapping it shut. The officer left. My son didn't. "You just made this harder," he muttered. "Did I?" His wife appeared from the hallway. She was holding a manila folder. She waved it like a flag. "We didn't want to do this, but you're forcing our hand." I said nothing. She opened the folder and tossed a document on the kitchen counter. I didn't move. "Medical authorization forms," she said. "Power of attorney. Health directives. All unsigned but pre-filled. Your doctor already recommended light monitoring." "For what?" She smiled, cold. "Forgetfulness, paranoia, mental decline." I leaned in. "You mean resistance?" "Semantics," she said. That night I waited until they were asleep. Then I entered her office, formerly the sewing room, and found the forms. A whole stack of them, labeled, dated, and ready to be mailed, but they were missing one thing: my signature. I sat down, the pocket watch ticking in the quiet like a countdown. They weren't trying to care for me. They were trying to declare me incompetent. And this was war. The next morning, I made a call to a woman named Janet, an estate attorney who used to be my wife's church friend. We hadn't spoken in years, but she remembered me instantly. "Jack," she said, "I've been meaning to call since the service." I heard what happened. The laughter. "You heard?" My cousin was there. I told her everything. The account freeze. The documents. The forged deed. The medical forms. There was a long pause on the other end. "I want to make it legal," I said. "I want to protect what's mine while I still can." Her voice firmed. "Then we don't waste another day." We made a plan. I hung up. Then I did something I hadn't done since the funeral. I went into my wife's closet. I found her cardigan. The soft one, still faintly scented with her perfume. In the pocket, a note I hadn't seen before. One line: "Don't trust their kindness." I folded it carefully, placed it in the pocket watch compartment, next to the officer's card, and closed it. My proof was building, and so was my patience. They wanted to scare me. But I was more than just an old man with a ticking relic. I was a man who had built everything. They were trying to dismantle, and I wasn't done fighting. Were they planning to lock me up to steal what's left? Pastor asked if I wanted to speak. I did. The church was packed tighter than it had been the day of the funeral. This wasn't a service, not officially. It was a community remembrance gathering. Candlelight, shared stories. Closure, they called it, closure, as if grief ever finishes its meal. I wore my best jacket, the one she always pressed herself. The pews creaked beneath the weight of old friends, distant family, and neighbors who still whispered when I walked past their hedges. When I entered, a hush fell. My son and his wife were already seated near the front. She wore black again, this time for appearance, not mourning. He avoided looking at me. Pastor Calvin stepped up to the pulpit and scanned the room. "Before we begin," he said gently, "Mr. Dawson has asked to say a few words." I rose slowly. The watch in my pocket ticked like thunder beneath my coat. I didn't climb the steps to the pulpit. I stood at ground level, eye to eye with everyone who had looked away from me at her funeral. "My wife," I began, voice steady, "was the reason this house of worship had a roof." A few nods. "She cooked for your children. She taught Sunday school here. She took no credit for any of it. And when she passed, many of you came to her funeral and saw her legacy laughed at." Murmurs. My eyes landed on my son. She left something behind. Not just memories. Not just this watch she had engraved for me. I held it up, turning it so the engraved words could catch the candlelight. "To Jack, my constant. Love M." I placed it gently on the pulpit base. She also left a letter. I unfolded the worn paper, dated 2 weeks before her passing, hidden in a place no thief would look, a clock she never let anyone touch. The room went still. She wrote, "They think I don't understand their code words. But I do. If I changed any papers, I didn't do it by choice." Gasps. Someone whispered, "What did he say?" I continued, louder now. My wife was manipulated, and after her death, someone, people I trusted, forged her signature, filed fraudulent deeds, tried to take this house, my home, our home. All heads turned. Some people glanced at my son. He squirmed. His wife's jaw tightened. I took out the scanned copies of her real will, the original deed, and the banking documents. I held them up like courtroom exhibits. "There are 2 versions of the truth," I said. "The one they tell, full of concern and helpfulness, and then there's this." Pastor Calvin stepped closer, voice uncertain. "Jack, are you accusing someone?" "I'm not accusing," I cut in. "I'm stating." Silence. I walked slowly down the center aisle and handed the letter to Pastor Calvin. He read the first few lines, eyes widening. "I trusted these people," I said. "My own son, his wife. I welcomed them into my home. And in return, they tried to erase the woman they claimed to love and bury me while I was still breathing." Someone stood up, Mrs. Hawley. She crossed her arms. "You mean they took money?" I nodded. "More than that. They tried to take everything." The pastor looked up from the letter. This is heavy, Jack." "It's not just heavy," I said. "It's criminal." Murmurs turned into whispers, and whispers turned into low discussions. My son stood abruptly. "He's confused. He's grieving. None of this is true." His wife grabbed his wrist. "Sit down." Pastor Calvin held up the letter. "This is your mother's handwriting, David." He didn't respond. "You forged legal documents?" Another voice asked. My son looked around the room, but this time no one looked back with sympathy. Not one. He sat down slowly, as if gravity had just caught up with his guilt. I turned to face the room one last time. "I'm not asking for your pity," I said. "I just want you to know she saw it coming, and I won't let her be silenced." I picked up the pocket watch and walked back to my seat, every step echoing against the church walls. As I passed by people, I saw them turn away from him now. The whispers were no longer about my age, or my confusion. They were about them, about what they'd done, about what they'd almost gotten away with. The benediction that followed was awkward and rushed. People left quietly, but not without a glance or comment. Outside, someone muttered, "How could they do that to him?" Another, "It's always the ones closest to you," and then, the voice I didn't expect, Pastor Calvin, handing me back the folded letter, whispered, "She'd be proud of you." I clutched the pocket watch, feeling the familiar pressure of its ticking return to my palm. And this time, the beat wasn't heavy, it was steady. They left, but the whispers followed them out the door. The envelope was heavier than it looked. 3 days after the church, I received a brown envelope stamped with thick red ink, confidential, hand delivery only. It was slid beneath my door in the early hours of the morning. Long before the sun warmed the porch, long before the birds dared to interrupt the hush. I found it waiting for me like a sealed verdict. I knew who sent it before I opened it. Janet inside was a letterhead I hadn't seen in decades, the same firm that filed our mortgage back in '92. Beneath it, a certified copy of my wife's original will, not the one they had forged. Not the edited draft passed through shadowy hands, but the real one, filed, stamped, witnessed. I ran my fingers across the embossed seal. Then I saw what else was inside, a small receipt. Safe, deposit box No. 27, opened March 11th. She'd placed it there. Years ago, Janet had recovered it after cross-checking my wife's account records. She never told me about that box. She never had to. But what she left inside it? Her will, and my pocket watch's twin, a photo of it taken the day she had it engraved, with a note clipped to the back. If anything happens, this proves what mattered most. I looked at that photo for a long time, then I called Janet. I'm ready. She didn't ask what I meant, she just said, "It's time." We moved quickly. A legal injunction was filed the same day to halt all property transactions. A cease and desist letter went out to the realtor, the estate office, the county clerk. Janet coordinated it all, fast, clean, airtight. And then came the part I didn't expect. She had arranged to have the court documents served by sheriff during an open house. Yes, they'd listed the home without telling me, and yes, they'd booked private walkthroughs with interested buyers while I was away, which meant, presumably, while I was in the next room, being ignored. But Janet knew the schedule, so I watched from the upstairs window as the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway, just as a couple in dress shoes and sunglasses were stepping onto the porch. My son opened the door, all charm and fake grief. He had a binder in one hand, coffee in the other. He didn't even see the badge until it was too late. The sheriff stepped forward, handed him the documents, and said loud enough for the couple to hear, "By order of the court, all estate actions are frozen pending investigation into fraudulent signatures and unlawful property claims. Do you understand?" The woman with the sunglasses gasped. The man with her turned away. I could hear the echo of the sheriff's voice even from upstairs. My son looked stunned. His wife, who had just appeared behind him, turned a shade paler than I'd ever seen. The couple left. So did the sheriff. But I didn't. I came down the stairs slowly. Deliberately, they turned when they saw me. "You did this," she hissed. I nodded. "And I'm just getting started." He threw the binder on the ground. "You've lost your mind." "No," I said, stepping past them. "I've just recovered it." I placed the certified will and the safe deposit receipt on the dining room table, right next to the framed photo of my wife. I set the pocket watch beside it. "The court has everything now," I said. "Your version of the truth is officially in hospice." They didn't speak. She was already pulling out her phone, probably texting a lawyer of her own. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and stood in the same spot where I had once danced with Marlene on a rainy Thursday evening, her feet on top of mine, her laughter louder than the thunder, and I smiled. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about honor, restoring hers and protecting mine. That night, I wrote a letter of my own, addressed to the community, posted online and pinned to the bulletin board at the church. I didn't mention names, just actions, just truth, and a quote from Marlene's letter. "Please protect what's left. Of me, of us." I signed it with my full name. The next morning, Pastor Calvin called to tell me he'd read it during service. "I hope that's okay." "It's perfect," I said. Later that afternoon, I saw a car pull up outside. It wasn't theirs. It was Reed, the realtor. He stood on the porch, held out the for sale flyers, and said quietly, "I'm here to apologize. I took them from him and tore them in half." "Thank you," I said. "Now don't ever list a home without speaking to the man who built it." He nodded. "Understood." He left without another word. And me? I stood in that doorway for a long time, pocket watch ticking in my palm, breathing the air of a home that finally felt mine again, even if only for a moment. But how long before they turned desperate? Bill collectors don't knock, they call nonstop. It began with the mailbox. For 3 days straight, it groaned under the weight of envelopes stamped urgent final notice, and the ever-damning return to sender. The names were never mine, All of them were addressed to my son or his wife. Credit cards, loan agencies, auto finance companies, all circling like buzzards over a carcass that hadn't realized it was dead yet. I watched him carry the stack inside each morning, flipping through them like fan mail, then slamming them down on the kitchen table without a word. She stayed quieter than usual, and suddenly, their late-night glasses of wine became silent dinners and whispered arguments behind closed doors. I didn't say a word. I just let it unravel, because I knew the silence wouldn't last long. One morning, as I poured coffee, my son's phone rang on the counter. He didn't pick it up. The screen flashed, Capital Advance Collections, third attempt. I didn't touch it, I didn't need to. That afternoon, while out running errands, I stopped by the grocery store. My list was short. Eggs, bread, the same brand of tea Marlene used to drink. As I reached for the eggs, I heard voices in the next aisle. Loud, familiar. You said it was handled, she snapped. It was until he froze the damn account. You lied to me, David. You said the house was signed. You promised. I stepped forward, pushing my cart slowly. She saw me first. Her mouth opened slightly, her face flushing pink. He turned next. We all stood there, between the cereal boxes and discount peanut butter, like a frozen scene in a cheap courtroom drama. Around us, shoppers slowed. A young clerk pretended to stock soup cans just 3 feet away, eyes wide. Dad, my son said, trying to reclaim composure. Funny seeing you here. Not really, I said, placing a carton of eggs into my cart. I live 5 blocks away. He reached for the bread shelf, grabbed a loaf he didn't need. Just getting a few things. On what card? I asked. His hand froze. She stormed past me without another word, but the damage was done. A man near the freezer leaned toward his wife and whispered, not quietly enough, that's the one who tried to take his dad's house. That night, they didn't speak to me, they didn't even look at me, but I heard them, from the vent above my bed. Her voice, shrill, accusing. You said your dad was senile. You said this was done. His reply, tired and panicked, he was supposed to fold. She didn't scream after that. She laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that wins. It was the sound of collapse. 2 days later, I answered the door to find a man in a navy suit holding a small folder. Mr. Dawson? Yes, I'm with Midstate Credit Recovery. Is David Dawson available? He's not home. Are you aware he co-signed a business loan last spring? Delinquent, I shook my head. I'm just his father. The man didn't smile. Well, if he's living here, the property becomes relevant. You might want to get ahead of this. He handed me the folder and left. Inside, a breakdown of nearly $96,000 in unpaid debt, 3 maxed credit cards, 1 foreclosed business license, 1 frozen joint investment account. It was all unraveling, exactly as it should. That night, I stepped into the backyard and sat on the bench she used to read on. The fall breeze stirred the wind chimes. I pulled out the pocket watch, still ticking, still warm, still mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. Janet. County audit complete. You were never removed from deed. All falsified documents flagged. Son's credit flagged for fraud. You're safe, Jack. It's done. But something in me knew better. It wasn't done. Not yet. Because people like my son don't quit when cornered. They get desperate. And desperation, that's when real damage begins. The next morning, I came downstairs to find him at the table, head in his hands, a cup of cold coffee untouched beside him. He didn't look up. I poured my own coffee, sat across from him. After a long pause, he whispered, I lost my job. I said nothing. She called HR, said she didn't feel safe with me around. He rubbed his temples. All the church gossip? It got back to the office. Still, I said nothing. His voice cracked. They're investigating me. Silence then. Did you do this? I looked him dead in the eye. No, I said. You did this to yourself. He didn't speak after that. He just got up, walked out the back door, let it slam behind him like a child denied dessert. Would they now come crawling or fighting? Waitress whispered, That's the guy who stole from his dad. I don't know why I went to the diner that morning. Maybe I missed the smell of bacon. Maybe I wanted a booth that didn't echo with betrayal. Or maybe, if I'm honest, I wanted to be seen. There's something about a small-town diner at 9 a.m., the scent of burnt coffee, the hush of half-finished gossip, the clink of mugs and forks and secrets being swallowed whole. I sat at the far booth under the mounted deer head, the same booth Marlene and I used to share on Fridays. She'd order French toast. I'd get ham and eggs. The waitress always brought extra syrup without being asked. Now it was just me, and the pocket watch, ticking beside my mug like a tiny patient witness. Across the room, conversation softened when I walked in. I saw it in their eyes, curiosity wrapped in caution. Then the bell above the door rang again, and in walked my son, hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, eyes raw. He didn't see me at first. He was headed to the counter when the teenage waitress, new girl barely 18, whispered something to her coworker and pointed. "That's him," she said. "The guy who stole from his dad." She didn't say it loud, but in a room like this she didn't have to. The words spread like heat under a skillet. A man near the window shifted in his seat. An older couple leaned in close. The cook paused with his spatula mid-air. My son heard it. He turned slowly, eyes landing on me across the diner. For a moment, he looked like he might bolt, but pride held him in place. He walked toward me. People watched every step. He slid into the booth across from me without asking. I didn't speak. Neither did he. The waitress came by, poured him a coffee without looking him in the eye. He stared into the cup like it held an answer, then softly, "Do you feel good about this?" I took a sip of mine. "I feel honest," he snorted. "You embarrassed me in front of the whole church." "No," I said. "You did that. You turned them against me. They turned when they saw what you were." His jaw clenched. "I didn't think it would go this far." "You forged a dead woman's signature," I said flatly. "How far did you expect it to go?" The pocket watch ticked between us. He stared at it, then whispered, "Mom always took your side." "No," I said. "She just knew the difference between family and a parasite." His face flinched. The waitress returned with my plate. He didn't get anything. Didn't even try. As she set the plate down, her hand brushed the watch. She looked up at me. "I'm sorry for what they did." Her voice was small but strong. He heard it. The whole room did. He stood quickly, knocking over the salt shaker. "Enjoy the show, folks," he muttered. Tossing a 20 on the table like that made him dignified. But he didn't leave quietly. As he stormed out, a man near the door said under his breath, "Scum." Another. Wouldn't last a day in my house. The bell above the door rang, and he was gone. But his shame stayed behind. I sat there, eating slowly, feeling every eye glance toward me, not with pity, but with something else. Something I hadn't felt in weeks. Respect, dignity, truth. Finally seen, the waitress returned. "He left his wallet," she said, holding it up. I glanced at it. "Let him come back for it." She paused, then opened it slightly empty. No cards, no cash, no ID, just a folded receipt from a liquor store and an old family photo, ripped in half. She set it on the table. "I guess he left more than that behind," she said, quietly. I picked up the wallet, stared at it, then slid it to the far edge of the table. "I guess he left his name behind, too." When I finished my meal, I paid in cash and left a tip big enough to matter. As I stood to go, the cook gave me a nod from the window. The same man who hadn't spoken to me since the funeral. Outside, the air felt clearer, like the town had finally shifted back into place like I had. I opened the pocket watch and looked at the engraving one more time. To Jack, my constant. Of M, it had been a compass, a witness, and now, a gavel. He left his wallet behind empty, like his name. I waited until midnight to sign it. It was raining again. Not the kind of rain that stirs romance or cools a hot afternoon, but the slow, steady kind that soaks through your collar and doesn't stop until you're clean or ruined. At exactly 11:57 p.m., I sat at the kitchen table with a single document, a pen, and the pocket watch resting open beside me. Its ticking was the only sound in the house. I had reread the new will 3 times. Every line, every clause, every sentence that once bore his name, now stripped, replaced, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with intention. I had removed him entirely. The house, the accounts, the insurance payouts, even the copyrights to the songs Marlene and I wrote in our youth, they would all go elsewhere. Now to a local veterans charity, to the church garden fund, to a young mother who cleaned the diner and saved. Every tip to get her GED, people who had nothing to do with blood, but everything to do with truth. The clock struck midnight. I signed, deliberately, full name, no hesitation. The pen glided as if it had been waiting for this moment its entire life. I pressed the pocket watch closed with a soft click and placed it inside a small cedar box, along with the signed copy and a folded photo of Marlene from our wedding day. Then, I buried it, not metaphorically, literally. I walked out into the backyard with a spade and that cedar box. The ground was soft from the rain and the digging didn't take long. Beneath the maple tree where she used to hang wind chimes, I lowered the box into the earth like a time capsule or a gravestone. One not for her, but for them. I covered it slowly, packing the mud down with my boot, then stood in silence, letting the cold soak through me. No speeches, no final words, just one truth buried deep. They would never touch it. The next morning, they noticed. He saw the empty frame first, where the old will used to hang in my office. He barged into the kitchen, face red, fist clenched. Where is it? I didn't look up from my toast. Gone. You burned it? No, I said. I gave it a funeral. His wife appeared behind him, phone in hand. We'll challenge it. Try. We'll win. You can't win back something that was never yours. She stepped forward, voice shaking. You're giving everything away? To strangers? Strangers didn't try to bury me alive. Don't do this, my son said quietly. Don't throw us away. I turned toward him, the pocket watch ticking beside my plate. You threw yourselves away the moment you mocked her eulogy. Silence. They left the room. Slower than before. Not angry, but shaken. That afternoon, I visited Janet and filed the will formally. She hugged me on the way out, said nothing, just smiled as if some final puzzle piece had clicked into place. Then came the final blow. A week later, I hand-delivered a copy of the will to my son. No envelope, no cover letter, just the document. He opened it right there on the porch. Read. The first page went pale, then he flipped to the signature line, saw my name, no hesitation. No loopholes. What's this? He croaked. Your inheritance, I said. There's nothing here. No, I said, stepping back down the stairs. There's everything here. Just none of it for you. He shook his head. You're really doing this. You're destroying the family. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting what little of it's left. He didn't say anything after that, just stood there, holding the document like it was dipped in poison. I didn't look back as I walked away. Didn't need to. That night, I made one more stop. The church. I placed a sealed letter into Pastor Calvin's hand. What's this? A statement, I said. In case they try anything else, he nodded. Understood. I left quietly, and when I returned home, I found the sewing room, her room, clean for the first time in weeks. No boxes, no measuring tape, no whispers, just stillness. And one folded quilt resting on the chair, as if someone had finally understood what should have never been touched. I opened the pocket watch one more time and held it to my ear. Still ticking, still faithful, still mine. And now? So was everything else. I buried my watch with the will. Proof they'd never touch it. He knocked twice, then called me Dad again. It was early. Too early for someone who had burned every bridge they stood on. But there he was, standing in the kitchen doorway holding a mug of coffee like he remembered how mornings used to feel. He didn't speak at first, just watched me butter a slice of toast like he didn't know how to start. Then, softly, Dad. It landed like a stone dropped in a dry well. I didn't look up. He walked in slowly, set the mug on the table and sat across from me. The chair creaked under his weight. I read it again, he said. The will. He nodded. You meant it? Yes, he swallowed. All of it? All of it. He leaned forward, arms resting on the table. You really cut us out? Everything? I reached into my pocket, pulled out the watch, and laid it between us. Its ticking filled the silence like a metronome to an old, unfinished tune. "You know what that sound is?" I asked. He shook his head. "Time." He stared at the watch. "I gave you years," I said. "Time to be better. Time to show up. Time to stand beside your mother instead of behind her back." He looked down, ashamed. "I know." "You don't know," I said. "You watched me bury her and you laughed. You forged her signature. You locked me in my own home and told the police I was confused." He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "No, this isn't your turn to speak." That time passed. He sat back. She entered the room a moment later. No robe this time, dressed quiet. She didn't speak. Just stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He looked at her, then back at me. "I panicked," he said. "The debt, the business. I didn't know what else to do." "You stole." "I didn't mean to." "You did. You just didn't mean to get caught," he flinched. "I didn't do it for the money," he said. "I did it because I thought you were ready to give up." I laughed once, sharp, bitter. "Give up what?" "Control? Responsibility? All of it." "You mean dignity," I said. "You thought I was ready to hand over my dignity." He didn't answer. The kitchen felt like a courtroom. Then, like a whispered script, he reached for his mug and said, "Please, I don't want this to end like this." His wife stepped forward now. "We were wrong," she said. "We got greedy. We forgot ourselves." "Greed doesn't make people forget," I said. "It makes them honest." He looked up again. "I'm not asking for everything. I'm not even asking for the house. I just want a second chance. To be your son again." The pocket watch ticked louder in that silence. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves against the windows. Then from the side yard came the creak of the neighbor's gate. A figure passed by the window, Mrs. Hawley watering her front flowers. She paused, glanced through the glass. Her eyes met mine, then moved slowly to my son's, then to his wife. And without breaking stride, she walked past. But I knew what I saw in her face. She'd heard, maybe not every word, but enough. That's what this town does. It listens. Even when you think it's looking the other way. He must have seen it too, because he slumped back in his chair, face buried in his hands. "I ruined everything," he whispered. I didn't reply. I just watched the condensation build on the side of his mug. "You don't have to forgive me," he said, voice breaking. "But please." "Don't erase me." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not erasing you," I said. "I'm just finally drawing the line between blood and betrayal." He wiped his face with both hands, nodding. "Okay." Then quietly, he reached for the watch, but I pulled it back before his fingers touched it. "This doesn't belong to you." He nodded again. "I just thought maybe you'd changed your mind." "No," I said. "Just my will." They left quietly. No slammed doors, no final threats, just retreat. As they passed through the side yard, I saw Mrs. Hawley walk up her steps, phone in hand. The seeds were already spreading, they always do. And by dinner, I knew every front porch in this town would hum with the truth, not my version, the version. After they were gone, I made tea, sat by the window, and placed the pocket watch on the sill so I could hear it tick with the wind. He left quietly, but his wife stared like it wasn't over. The park was quiet until someone clapped. They unveiled the bench on a Thursday, no fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just a few folding chairs, a gentle breeze, and the people who still understood what a promise was worth. Pastor Calvin stood beneath the old oak at Willow Park and said a few words about Marlene, about her kindness, about her laughter, about the dozens of hand-sewn baby blankets she'd donated to the church nursery without ever taking credit. I sat in the front row, holding the same pocket watch she had given me 40 years earlier, the same one that had ticked through grief, betrayal, and war inside my own walls. The engraving still read, "To Jack, my constant. Love M." I ran my thumb over it like a talisman. The new bench stood a few feet from the garden path, cherry wood, brass plaque, soft curve in its backrest. The plaque read, "In loving memory of Marlene Dawson she loved." Quietly but lived loudly. I didn't see my son in the crowd, or his wife. And that was by design. Not because I banned them. Because when truth finally roots itself in a town like ours, there's nowhere left for lies to hide. Their names had become punchlines, first whispered, now spoken aloud in the diner. At the post office. In the pews, the sheriff's inquiry remained open. Fraud investigations take time, but the real sentence had already been passed. They had been exiled the way only small towns can exile someone, not by law, but by absence. Neighbors no longer waved. The church newsletter listed prayer requests, but not theirs. Their house sat unsold, their mailbox unstuffed, their porch untouched by trick-or-treaters that Halloween, and me? I was left with silence. The good kind, the kind that wraps around you without weight. After the ceremony, people came by. Mrs. Hawley with her hydrangeas. Reed the realtor with an awkward handshake. The waitress from the diner who still brought me coffee exactly how Marlene used to make it. I stayed seated on the bench long after everyone left. Just me, the pocket watch, and the wind. I pulled out a small mason jar. Inside, soil from our backyard, from under the maple tree, where her letter, our will, and the pocket watch's first resting place had been buried. I poured the soil beneath the bench, let it mix with the earth like an offering. Then I placed the pocket watch into a new capsule, sealed stainless steel, weatherproof. I buried it beside the bench, not because I didn't want it anymore, because I wanted her to have it again. Forever. When I stood, the wind chimes in the trees above rang once, soft and slow. Someone across the path clapped once. Then again, I turned. It was the diner waitress. She gave me a nod, wiped her eye, and walked away. No words, none needed. That night, I returned home to a house that no longer whispered of war. The sewing room had been converted to a small library. The kitchen smelled of lemon oil and fresh wood polish. Kept no photos of them, my son or his wife, in sight. Not from revenge, but because you don't hang pictures of people who tried to steal your soul. You leave room for what matters. At sunset, I sat on the porch with my tea and watched as the light fell through the window and landed on her chair. For a moment, it felt like she was still there, not as a ghost, as a memory no longer tainted. The wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, and I smiled. Because this wasn't the ending I expected. It was better, not because I won, but because I endured, because she endured, and because, in the end, the truth outlived the betrayal. I rose from the chair, carried my tea back inside, and paused by the mantel. The space where the watch once sat was empty now, but not hollow, because it was exactly where it needed to be. Out there, with her. Time didn't heal me. It judged them.